perspectives. All right, so we got another win to celebrate coming from the Trump administration. Woo woo! So he just announced another trade deal with China. That's right. So we already got a trade deal with Great Britain, and now we got one with China. Trump announced that he lowered the tariffs down from about 145% down to about 30%, while China lowered their tariffs on us from 125 down to 10%. But if you guys have been listening to the anti-American Democrat-run media for the last 3 months, they've been fear-mongering and gaslighting the American people, saying that we're going to be forced out of our homes, we're going to lose our apartments, we're going to lose our retirement, we're going to lose our savings, we're going to be forced into a recession. They was just fear-mongering. Even though when we were actually in a recession during the Biden administration, they were like, oh, no, that's not a recession, it's just transitory. They refuse to acknowledge that Trump is actually carrying out exactly what he planned. They would rather see America fail if it means Trump failing.
Here in Geneva, we witnessed marathon talks over the last 2 days, 8 hours of discussions on Saturday, several hours more yesterday, and they've yielded a major breakthrough. As you noted, we've seen the U.S. and China now agree to slash tariffs for 90 days.
The prime minister came in at the end of February to remember that meeting he had with Donald Trump, and he pulled me aside and he said, so what are we going to do? And I said, look, you've got to pick a businessman. You've got a businessman behind the Oval Office, behind the desk. Pick a businessman and let's get a deal done. And so he went out of the ordinary, he picked a businessman, and we got right to it. You have to remember, this is not just a headline deal. This is thousands and thousands of products that are going to unleash $5 billion of our ability, our farmers, our business people. We can now sell to the UK that we've never been able to do before. And, my favorite part was I bring Donald Trump the deal and I say, look, here's the deal. And he says, come on, how can I make it better? So I go through all the details and he picks up the phone and he calls the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and he makes the deal $1 billion better yesterday.
But starting today, the United States will no longer subsidize the health care of foreign countries, which is what we were doing. We're subsidizing others' health care, countries where they paid a small fraction of what for the same drug that what we pay many, many times more for, and will no longer tolerate profiteering and price gouging from Big Pharma.
Greetings and welcome back to Wolf Cage, Los Angeles. Major developments, major developments that happened over the weekend regarding China and Big Pharma. Let's get into it.
Before we begin, let me say a few words about the historic events that took place over the last few days. On Saturday, my administration helped broker a full and immediate ceasefire, I think a permanent one, between India and Pakistan, ending a dangerous conflict of two nations with lots of nuclear weapons. And they were going at it hot and heavy, and it was seemingly not going to stop. And I'm very proud to let you know that the leadership of India and Pakistan was unwavering, powerful, but unwavering in both cases. And having these, they really were, from the standpoint of having the strength and the wisdom and fortitude to fully know and to understand the gravity of the situation. And we helped a lot. And we helped also with trade. I said, come on, we're going to do a lot of trade with you guys. Let's stop it. Let's stop it. If you stop it, we're doing trade. If you don't stop it, we're not going to do any trade. People have never really used trade the way I used it, that I can tell you. And all of a sudden they said, I think we're going to stop. And they have. And they did it for a lot of reasons, but trade is a big one. We're going to do a lot of trade with Pakistan. We're going to do a lot of trade with India. We're negotiating with India right now. We're going to be soon negotiating with Pakistan. And we stopped the nuclear conflict. I think it could have been a bad nuclear war. Millions of people could have been killed. So I'm very proud of that.
It's a rare and powerful thing to witness a leader who chooses peace over war, not just in words, but in action. Because let's be honest, in a world where conflict often fuels headlines and war drives profit for the powerful, choosing diplomacy That's a bold move. But what's even more remarkable is when a leader truly understands what ordinary people want. Not politicians, not defense contractors, but people, working men, working women who just want a little respect, a little stability, and the chance to earn a decent living. Think about it. What do most folks want around the world? It's simple. Dignity, a roof over their head, food on the table, and a future they don't have to fear. And that brings us to the moment that didn't get nearly enough attention in mainstream press, when the tension between India and Pakistan, two nuclear-armed rivals, by the way, reached a dangerous peak in 2019. The world held its breath. Skirmishes had escalated, troops mobilizing, and the threat of open war was extremely real. But then someone stepped in, and that someone was none other than President Donald Trump. Now, whatever your politics may be, this moment, well, it deserves a closer look, because instead of fanning the flames, Trump took a different approach. He essentially said, hey, let's stop fighting. Let's cool down. Let's sit at the table. And instead of losing lives, how about we all make a little money? Now that is a very American way to mediate. And you can roll your eyes if you want, but it worked. India and Pakistan have backed off. The immediate threat de-escalated. And a fragile peace, though temporary, was restored. Here's the fact. India and Pakistan have fought 4 wars since 1947, and over 50,000 people have died in direct conflicts. Each time, civilians bore the brunt. So when someone steps in and breaks that cycle, even for a moment, that matters. And maybe Trump's message cut through because it wasn't cloaked in diplomatic doublespeak. It was blunt, it was transactional, but it resonated. Because at the end of the day, leaders may posture, but people, well, we just want peace. We just want prosperity. So ask yourself, what would the world look like if more leaders talked about building instead of bombing, about trading instead of invading? What if the true strength of a nation was measured not by how many tanks it has, but how many families it lifts out of poverty? That's the conversation we need to be having, because peace is profitable and respect is universal.
In addition, yesterday we achieved a total reset with China after productive talks in Geneva. Both sides now agreed to reduce the tariffs imposed after April 2nd to 10% for 90 days as negotiators continue on the larger structural issues. And I want to tell you that a couple of things. First of all, that doesn't include the tariffs that are already on, that are our tariffs, and it doesn't include tariffs on cars, steel, aluminum, things such as that, or tariffs that may be imposed on pharmaceuticals, because we want to bring the pharmaceutical businesses back to the United States, and they're already starting to come back now based on tariffs. Because they don't want to pay 25, 50, or 100% tariffs, so they're moving them back to the United States. I spoke to Tim Cook this morning, and he's going to, I think, even up his numbers, $500 billion. He's going to be building a lot of plants in the United States for Apple, and we look forward to that. I really do look forward to that. But the talks in Geneva were very friendly. The relationship is very good. We're not looking to hurt China. China was being hurt very badly. They were closing up factories. They were having a lot of unrest. And they were very happy to be able to do something with us. And the relationship is very, very good. I'll speak to President Xi maybe at the end of the week. We have some other things we're doing.
Over the last 100 days or so since President Trump took office, one thing, for me at least, has become crystal clear. Most people, and I mean this with all due respect, have no idea how real negotiation works. We've become so used to instant gratification in this digital age. Swipe here, stream that. We want results now, or we scream that it's a failure. But leadership doesn't work like that. Negotiation sure doesn't work like that. And building something that lasts, especially on the world stage, it takes time. It takes pressure. It takes strategy. And here's the truth. Most folks criticizing Trump's approach to trade have never sat at a real table where power, where money, where national interests collide. They've never had to juggle competing agendas, balance egos, or play political chess with global superpowers. Because when you're negotiating, especially with a giant like China, you're not just dealing with one voice. You're dealing with an entire system with its own interests, its own pressures, and long-term vision. Trump knew this, and he didn't flinch. He stepped into one of the toughest trade battlegrounds in modern history, a space where, for decades, American politicians smiled when we got ripped off. Let's get the facts straight. The U.S. trade deficit with China peaked at $419 billion in 2018. That's billions in American dollars flying out the window. While American factories shut down and the middle-class jobs vanished, all while the political elite cashed in on backroom deals and foreign investments. Then Trump came in and he said, enough. No more sweetheart deals. No more letting China flood our markets while blocking ours. No more American taxpayers footing the bill. And then came the tariffs. Strategic, aggressive. Some called it reckless. But guess what? It got China to the table. And for the first time in years, Beijing took Washington seriously. You see, this isn't just about taxes on steel or soybeans. This is about fairness. This is about restoring economic sovereignty, about making sure the American worker isn't treated like a pawn in some globalist game where only the insiders win. But here's the kicker. Real negotiation requires give and take. Not everything goes your way. But when the other side knows you're serious, they start to respect the red line. Trump didn't fold. He played the long game. And for once, America didn't act like the world's doormat. We acted like the powerhouse that we are. So the next time someone shrugs off the so-called art of the deal, ask them, have you ever had to stand toe-to-toe with the second largest economy in the world and fight for your people? Because that's exactly what happened. And while it's not perfect, I think it was bold. It was unapologetic. And it was long overdue.
But starting today, the United States will no longer subsidize the health care of foreign countries, which is what we were doing. We're subsidizing others' health care, countries where they paid a small fraction of what, for the same drug, that what we pay many, many times more for. And we'll no longer tolerate profiteering and price gouging from Big Pharma. But again, it was really the countries that forced Big Pharma to do things that, frankly, I'm not sure they really felt comfortable doing, but they've gotten away with it, these countries. European Union has been brutal. And the drug companies actually told me stories. It was just brutal how they forced them. And European Union suing all our companies, Apple, Google, Meta. They're suing all of our companies. They end up, they have judges that are European Union-centric, and they get rewarded $15 billion, $17 billion, $20 billion, and they use that to run their operation. It's not going to happen any longer, that I can tell you. So what's been happening is we've been subsidizing other countries throughout the world, not just in Europe, throughout the world. European Union was the most difficult, from what I understand. I mean, I'll tell you a story. A friend of mine who's a businessman, very, very, very top guy. Most of you would have heard of him. A highly neurotic, brilliant businessman, seriously overweight, and he takes the fat shot drug. And he called me up, and he said, President, he calls me, he used to call me Donald, now he calls me President, so that's nice respect. But he's a rough guy, smart guy, very successful, very rich. I wouldn't even know how we would know this, but because he's got comments. President, could I ask you a question? What? I'm in London, and I just paid for this damn fat drug I take. I said, it's not working. He said, I just paid $88. And in New York, I pay $1,300. What the hell is going on? He said, so I checked. And it's the same box, made in the same plant, by the same company. It's the identical pill that I buy in New York. And here I'm paying $88 in London. In New York, I'm paying $1,300. Now, this is a great businessman, but he's not familiar with this crazy situation that we have. But he was stunned. But it was just one of those stories. And I brought it up with the drug companies, represented by somebody who's very, very smart, good person, too. And we argued about it for about half hour. And then finally he just said, because they can't justify it, he just said, look, you got me. You got me. I can no longer they've been justifying this crap for years. They said, oh, it's research and development. Well, I said, well, research and development, other countries should pay research and development too. It's for their benefit. It was just one of those things. And the other countries would set a price and they'd meet the price and they'd say, if you don't meet the price, you can't sell it in our country. I said, well, then you walk away and, they'll call you back and they'll sell it in the country. But now they'll have to do that. So for the first time in many years, we'll slash the cost of prescription drugs and we will bring fairness to America. Drug prices will come down by much more, really, if you think 59. If you think of a drug that is sometimes 10 times more expensive, it's much more than the 59%. It depends.
Now, let's be honest. I'm not a big pharma guy by any stretch. But if I'm keeping it real for millions of Americans out there who rely on prescription drugs just to function, this next issue is massive. Because if you've ever stood at a pharmacy counter, clutching a prescription and staring at that price that makes your jaw drop, you already know something is broken and you're not alone. Here in the United States, we pay some of the highest drug prices on earth. And I'm not just talking about a few extra dollars more. No. According to a 2021 RAND Corporation study, U.S. drug prices are nearly 2.5 times higher than those in 32 other nations. That's not a market. That's a shakedown. Meanwhile, countries like Canada, the UK, and even India can buy the same exact medication from the same companies for a fraction of what we pay. And why? Because in America, Big Pharma has had free reign for decades. They've lobbied, they've manipulated, and they price gouged the public, while Congress looked the other way and CEOs cashed in billion-dollar bonuses. But then, someone finally stepped in. Guess who? Whether you love him, whether you hate him, Donald Trump was the only leader, at least in my lifetime, who had the guts to say, enough is enough. He didn't just talk about it. He took real action. Trump signed executive orders aimed at lowering prescription drug prices, pushing for most favored nation pricing, meaning Americans would pay the same low prices that other countries negotiate. Not a penny more. He also fought to allow states, even individuals, to import safe, cheaper medications from Canada. Now you tell me, why was that such a revolutionary idea? Because it cut right through the greed, right through the monopoly. And guess who fought back? Big Pharma, lobbyists, even politicians on both sides of the aisle who've been getting fat off industry donations. But for everyday Americans, this was a game changer, especially for seniors on fixed incomes, families with sick kids, and anyone who's ever had to choose between groceries and perhaps insulin. This is what leadership looks like, guys. Not endless committees, not empty campaign promises, but moves that hit Big Pharma where it hurts and put people first. So the next time someone says, Trump didn't do anything for regular Americans, ask them, have they checked the price of their meds lately? And then ask them, who really tried to change that.
This is an extraordinary day. This is an issue that, I grew up in the Democratic Party, and every major Democratic leader for 20 years has been making this promise to the American people. This was the fulcrum of Bernie Sanders' runs for presidency, that he was going to eliminate this discrepancy between Europe and the United States. But as it turns out, none of them were doing it. It's one of these promises that politicians make to their constituents, knowing that they'll never have to do it. And the reason they'll never have to do it is because they know that Congress is controlled in so many ways by the pharmaceutical industry. There's at least one pharmaceutical lobbyist for every congressman, every senator in Capitol Hill, and every member of the Supreme Court. By some estimates, 3. Pharmaceutical companies, the industry itself spends 3 times what the next largest lobbyist spends on lobbying. So this was an issue that people talked about, but nobody wanted to do anything because it was radioactive. They knew you couldn't get it by Congress. We now have a president who is a man of his word, who has the courage. President Trump was taking money from the pharmaceutical industry too. I think they gave you $100 million. Yeah. But he can't be bought, unlike most of the politicians in this country. And he is standing here for the American people. I don't know what, there's writers like Lord Elizabeth Warren or Robert Reich who are saying that President Trump is on this side of the oligarchs. There has never been a president more willing to stand up to the oligarchs than President Donald Trump. And I'm very, very proud of you, Mr. President, for your courage, I'll say, because I don't want to be crude, your intestinal fortitude, your stiff spine, and your willingness to stand up for the American people. We have 4.2% of the world's population. Our country represents 75% of the revenues for pharmaceutical companies. We spend in our country $1,126 per capita on drugs. In Britain, they spend about $240. They spend 1/5 of what we do. And this is true across Europe. And the drug companies, Europeans, if you ask them, it made no sense what they were saying. America has to pay for this innovation or it's not going to happen. What President Trump is saying to our European partners is you got to raise the amount that you're paying for those drugs and pay for your share of the innovation. That the United States is no longer subsidizing that. If the Europeans raise the price of their drugs by just 20%, that is $10 trillion that can be spent on innovation, and the health of all people all across the globe is going to increase because we're going to have better products. So I'm just so grateful to be here today. I never thought that this would happen in my lifetime. I have a couple of kids who are Democrats, are big Bernie Sanders fans. And when I told them that this was going to happen, they had tears in their eyes because they thought this is never going to happen in our lifetime. And we finally have a president who's willing to stand up for the American people.
So I think what Robert Kennedy is saying right now is not just important, but critical, because it strikes at the root of how real change in this country is so damn hard to come by. It's not just the bureaucracy. It's not just the red tape. It's because our system, the very foundation of our government, has been bought and sold. Congress, senators, career politicians with smiling faces and patriotic slogans. Behind closed doors, they're pocketing checks from Big Pharma, Big Tech, Big AG, you name it. And guess who ends up paying the price? We do. Every time you overpay for a prescription, every time a life-saving drug is out of reach, every time your health insurance gets more expensive and covers less, that's not just bad luck. That's the result of decades of collusion between politicians and corporate lobbyists who couldn't care less about the average American. And that's what RFK Jr. is trying to expose. He's putting names to the game, calling out quiet corruption that's been hiding in plain sight. But here's where things get even more interesting because, yes, even Donald Trump received donations from Big Pharma. We don't have to sugarcoat that. That's a fact. But what's unheard of, and I mean damn near historic, is that despite all those donations, Trump still called them out, still pushed for price transparency, still demanded that Americans stop getting gouged at the pharmacy counter while CEOs fly private jets to Switzerland. Now you tell me, when was the last time you saw a politician take the money but still bite the hand that fed him? It doesn't happen because most of these guys, they're owned. You never hear about the deals. They make sure you're blaming someone else, some foreign enemy, some nameless force, while they quietly get rich behind the curtain. So when Trump stood up and said, we're going to lower drug prices, and we're not asking Big Pharma's permission to do it, that wasn't just policy. That's rebellion. And whether you're a Republican, whether you're a Democrat, or something in between, you've got to recognize the courage it takes to take on an industry that spends over $370 million a year on lobbying in Washington. That's more than oil. That's more than defense. That's more than any other sector. So yeah, I think this is a great sign. And if RFK Jr. is bringing more sunlight into this swamp, fantastic. Because the only way we win is if they stop getting paid to lose on our behalf.
Thank you, Secretary Kennedy. This is the most powerful executive order on pharmacy pricing and healthcare ever in the history of our nation. And it's only happening because we have a president with the fortitude, the guts to stand up to the withering criticism and lobbying that's going to occur as soon as folks hear about the executive order. So on behalf of the child in Philadelphia who's got an autoimmune disease with a $1,000 a month drug, or the older woman in Los Angeles who's on a blood thinner who can't afford her copay, I want to thank President Trump. God bless you for having the guts to take on this industry. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
So let's talk about the details a little bit. And this is primarily about equalization, as President Trump said. It's about fairness. Think of NATO as a metaphor. When President Trump said, you've got to pay a little more so it makes sense for all of us, they came up and the European countries contributed. The same thing we believe will happen in this situation. Most people who have thought about this process agree that it is patently unfair to tolerate the numbers that Secretary Kennedy and President Trump have reflected to you. On this chart to my left is a list of the 10 drugs that were negotiated in the IRA. Again, this is the bill, the law that regulates a negotiation process. This is the best price that was able to be obtained by the Biden administration. And if you look at these numbers, they actually reflect how much on top of the most favored nation price was being paid by the United States. So the closest to me, and Bob, you can point to the Jardians, the closest one, 289%, the one that's closest to you. That means that we are paying in America 4 times more than that drug costs in other countries. Again, 100% is the baseline. It's 289% above that baseline. It goes all the way down to when we're paying 50% more than any other country. That's the range. As was pointed out by President Trump, half the time we're paying 3 times more than is paid in other countries. It doesn't make any sense for the system. That stated, President Trump has over and over again indicated, and Secretary Kennedy reflected as well, we want innovation. We want our technology partners doing the best they can to make the best solutions for drugs to cure as many people in America and around the world as possible. By getting our allies to pay a bit more, as they should be, and they should have for many years been doing, will course correct a problem that's gotten out of hand. And by doing that in a thoughtful, effective way, we're going to be able to get the pharmaceutical industry whole. Those jobs will still be here, will still be productive, will still be curing cancer and a slew of other ailments that plague humanity. America will still be the leader in this space, but we'll be paying the appropriate amount, the right-sized amount for those tasks. So over the next 30 days, The four of us up here, together with people standing in the back of this room who are doing a lot of the heavy lifting, are going to be approaching pharmaceutical companies to talk specifically about what we want the most favored nation price to be based on the best data we have. We're looking forward to a thoughtful interaction with these corporate leaders, many of whom we've spoken to and in quiet will agree the system is not right the way it is. They're patriotic Americans. They want what's right. But the fact that in my lifetime, as Secretary Kennedy said, for the first time, we have a thoughtful and aggressive approach, thanks to President Trump, on taking on the special interests, should give all Americans confidence that this is an administration that stands for fairness, and it should chill the waters for those who believe they can push us away from our North Star, which is to take care of the American people. Mr. President, God bless you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Jay, you want to go next?
Sure. So I teach economics at Stanford as well as health policy. And one thing that's really, really simple in economics is that when you have a persistent price difference for the same product between two countries, there is something deeply wrong. And what President Trump has done is a historic measure that should have been done a long time ago. What we're going to do is make sure that those prices become much closer to equal, like a competitive market you'd expect. Right now, what's happening is the American people are subsidizing in large fraction the research and development efforts for drug companies around the world by the higher prices that we pay. With this new order, Europe will share the burden of that. And in fact, if you may think of it as like as somehow it's like it's going after drug companies, actually it's helping drug companies. Because what we're also going to do with this order, what President Trump has done with this order, is he's said to European governments, look, if you are taking advantage of the drug companies by forcing them to charge very, very low prices, we're going to defend American drug companies in Europe. At the same time, we're standing up for the American consumer who's been paying far too high prices for far too long. I can go back decades to point to congressional reports after government report after government report of tremendously high drug prices, much higher than the rest of the world. And nothing has been done about it until this moment. And I'm really, really proud, President Trump, that you've done this. I'm really proud to be included in this and looking forward to the work ahead.
Thank you, Jay. Great.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the many doctors I've talked to about this very issue, thank you for taking the bull by the horns. Presidents on both sides of the aisle have talked about this and floated it and said they've wanted to do it. So you've had the courage to do it. Thank you. I've been a surgical oncologist at Johns Hopkins for 22 years, and I have seen patients suffer. We didn't take an oath to heal patients and then watch their life get ruined financially with their home, mortgage, retirement, going down the drain with GoFundMe campaigns, raising money from church communities and synagogues and friends they haven't seen in 20 years to try to raise money for what? For a system where Americans have been getting ripped off by 10, 12, 15 times higher prices than we see in other countries. The fundamental problem in healthcare is that we've had non-competitive markets. We can do little things around the edges, or we can transform those markets to competitive markets. And that's what this executive order does today. Imagine buying a Ford for $175,000, a regular car, and then hearing that people in London are buying it for $10,000 every day, all day long. That is the craziness of this system. We're going to do everything we can at the FDA to support this executive order. It's transformative. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You know, there's something truly inspiring about what Robert F. Kennedy is saying right now. And sure, whether it holds or not, well, that remains to be seen, of course. We've all heard the promises before. We've all been burned. So yeah, little healthy skepticism is fair. But as it stands right now, in this moment, it feels a little bit different. It feels like hope. Finally, it seems that we're actually seeing some voices emerge. Whether it's RFK Jr., whether it's Donald Trump, folks that don't seem to be chasing book deals or Netflix specials or lifetime seats at the elite table. Instead, they're saying, you know what? Let's do something real for the people. Because most politicians today are playing a completely different game. They want to live above us, make money off of us, and sell us out piece by piece while feeding us slogans like equity and progress and freedom that they never actually deliver on. But when someone comes along, someone like Trump, who maybe doesn't need the money, maybe doesn't need the approval of the establishment, and maybe, just maybe, wants to become a legend in the eyes of the regular, working class American. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, that's exactly what we should want from our leaders. Because in order to become a legend for us, they'd have to uplift us. They'd have to protect us. They'd have to fight for us. That's what this is really all about. That's what this is really all about. Not vanity, not legacy, not Twitter applause. It's about a leader saying, let me go down in history as one of the ones who actually gave a damn. And you know what? That kind of motivation just might be what this broken system needs, because it's not corrupted by greed. It's driven by impact, by legacy, by service. If that means lowering drug prices, ending endless wars, cutting red tape, and giving Americans their dignity back, then let that man be a legend. Because at the end of the day, what's wrong with the leader wanting to go down in history for lifting his people up? Nothing. Not a damn thing. And maybe, just maybe, that's the glimmer of hope we've been waiting for.